This is camera number 3 and it's virtually identical to camera number 2 in its symptoms, which means that the vertical alignment is spot on and the horizontal alignment is slightly out, and that the images coincide before just before you reach the infinity position on the focus ring. Now that screw head, the lock screw, I'm having trouble seeing that. It was loose. Okay, so I've just tightened that. Let's see where I am. Yeah, we want to make exactly the same adjustment as I did on the other camera. Now, these screw heads have been quite severely painted with something. They're not locked, but there's a lot of black paint on them. Okay, so I'm just went past the point I needed to be at. The adjustments on these rangefinders is nowhere near as touchy as the adjustments on the Retina III small C cameras. I'll lock that and check again. I think I'm there. That looks good. And the vertical alignment looks good. So another camera done. I'll put the top on this. You'll notice that I've got a shortened top cover on here, reclaimed from parts cameras, and that's so that the meter doesn't get knocked and come adrift while I'm busy working on the rangefinder. Very handy if you're servicing cameras on a regular basis. So this brings us to camera number 4, the one that was just made up out of pieces simply so we could display the third type of cord tensioner. Now this one is a real ruffian. It was made up out of bits. The rangefinders had some considerable amount of toing and froing, swapping bits and pieces backwards and forwards, and the vertical alignment is well out. The moving image, the image that moves when you move your focus ring here on the shutter, is high. It's much higher than the stationary image. And what I think I need to do is to loosen this screw here and move this bracket forward to change the tilt of this mirror. The amount of adjustment required is far more than you can get by simply shifting this front group. Looking at this, I can see by the touch of lacquer on those corners that somebody's played with that previously on that rangefinder, or on that piece of the rangefinder. But here's what I want to do. I want to move this mirror here forward, tip it forward, which basically means I'll slacken that screw, and I've got a screwdriver made with a little cam on the end, an eccentric. It allows me to pop that into there and rotate it to push that leaf forward. And that's what I'm going to attempt to do now, if I can get this to work. So I'll slacken that screw off just slightly. I'll make a scratch there so I've got a reference from where I've been, and then if I need to return to where I've come from, I've got some sort of reference. Let's try rotating this and pushing that thing forward slightly. It's not really moving. Is that screw too tight still? Might be. It certainly moved. I'll lock that and check what I've got. I probably moved that a very, very small amount. You wouldn't get a feeler gauge down there. Hang on, I'll just check this, what I've got. Now my moving image is too low. I've gone too far. Just that little bit of movement that I made there was too much. So I'll slacken the screw off, pull this back to where I think I started from, and check again, tightening that screw. My moving image is high now, but it's only just high, so I've got to be more subtle with my adjustments. I'll slacken that screw off and move it just a tiny amount. It's one of those things that if you think you've moved it, you've probably moved it too far. I really can't, I don't have the light on my side here, I can't see what I'm doing. Let's just see if I can, I'll move this, swing that camera around so I've got the light from the window where I want it. And what I'm watching is that line that I scribed. That is probably too much again. Let me check. It certainly was. Back again. You can see why I dislike making any changes to this bracket. Sometimes it's almost just pot luck that you can hit it on the right spot. We can make adjustments at the front here for fine adjustments, but not the level I'm seeing here. Okay. I'm still high. I'm sure Kodak had a special tool for doing this, which made life much easier. Okay, my horizontal adjustment is bang on. That's my vertical alignment rather is bang on. My horizontal adjustment needs the same change as the other 3 cameras. Now I can see as I look down in here that the little fork on that arm that goes around that screw head is splayed right out. That tells me that someone has failed to loosen off the lock screw and twisted the eccentric screw here, and it's actually bent that arm open. So it means that I'd need to swing that screw around quite a way for that to contact that arm, and that's not desirable at all. So I'm going to see if I can squeeze that fork back closed with a pair of pliers. I might not be able to. I may have to lift the whole rangefinder out, take that arm out and deal to it. Yeah, I think that's what I'll have to do. Right, so I've got to lift the rangefinder off this camera. So my adjustments, my horizontal adjustment's the only one that's likely to be affected. The vertical alignment will not be affected by removing this. It should come back where it left off. Take my rangefinder out. There's get those two screws. I'll zoom in a bit to see if you can get a better view of that arm. I think you can see that very clearly there, that this arm has been bent outwards. Someone failed to loosen this lock screw and they've just twisted this screw round until it's bent that arm. I'll remove the lock screw. I should be able to lift this arm off and then straighten that thing up. So I need to bend this arm now so that that is a rectangular cutout there, not running off in that direction. I've got my pliers. I'll just do this off camera because I don't think you'll be able to, oh, you might be able to see what I'm doing. That will probably do it. I'm just making sure it's running parallel in this plane. That looks okay. Put it back on the rangefinder. The pivot for it is this little stub here which sits down into the arm of the rangefinder there. Get rid of that little bit of dust. Oh, that looks a lot neater. I notice my lock screw has a washer underneath it. That's good. That means that when you do up the lock screw, it's less likely to disturb the setting, or when you tighten your lock screw, it's less likely to disturb the setting than if it had no washer at all. Okay, so that looks good. I'll just tighten up my lock screw there and get this one back in the camera. I'll find that little screw that I used to lock this rangefinder in place before I put it back in, because it makes life much easier if you've got this locked before you're feeding it back into the camera. Searching time. Alright, same technique as before. Make sure that that arm is well forward. Swing this into position. Make sure that the fork on the frame selector is coupled correctly. That one just fell into place. Be good if everything went as smoothly. One screw. These are not the original black screws that would have been in here. These are something else. This camera was made up out of parts and I haven't necessarily got all the parts in the world. Of course, the reason it was made out of parts was it came to me as a disassembled parts camera, and it was left to be used as parts because it was so ugly with its special chrome look. Okay, well, I'll check this again now and see what sort of result I get, see if I can get good horizontal adjustment. Well, I'm going nowhere unless I unlock the rangefinder by removing that lock screw. Now I can check. Okay, camera 4 is okay as well now. Took some mucking around with the vertical alignment to get that correct, but that's all good now. So I've got my 4 Retina IIIS's with the rangefinders all fitted back, adjusted, and the top cover in place in each case. So next for these cameras, I think it'll be fitting the Leatherettes. As you can see, camera number 4, the ugly one, I've already put Leatherettes on there. It's got a special hand selected group of Leatherettes. I just went through my parts boxes and got a set of Leatherettes which were complete but were less than stunning, and put them on the camera. I think the other cameras are fine. I think one of them, perhaps camera number 2, the base Leatherette didn't come off nicely on one of the cameras, either 2 or 3. I was able to get about 3/4 of it off. The last little bit just came to pieces at this end, and I'll replace that with an entire new piece of Leatherette, I think. Well, new used Leatherette. Here's the situation with the Leatherettes for this camera. This is the Leatherette from the base. It's the only one that really failed in the cleaning up process and lost the end. Basically, it just disintegrated completely. So I've got a choice. I can either try and patch it or I can replace the lot. So what would I do to patch it? Well, here I've got the end of another Leatherette. In fact, I think this was a 3 Big C style Leatherette that I actually got given a bunch of these some time ago. They were new old stock, but unfortunately they'd been badly stored and they had shrunken so that they were miles too short. But we can probably use this. You can see I've even had to make a cut across here so it'll stretch across the width. And you can see if you look down that that's not exactly centered up on that tripod bush as it should be. So what I'm going to do is glue that loosely in place, put this Leatherette over the top, make a cut here and a cut here, peel back the pieces we don't want, and then glue this Leatherette in place. And we should be left with a almost invisible line at each side, which will be underneath the tripod surround, and there'll be virtually nothing to see. Well, at least that's the plan. So we'll see how it goes in practice. So first I'll apply a bit of adhesive to this, and I'm using my favourite contact adhesive, which you probably won't be able to find because it's only sold here. Years ago I was contacted by someone who had some retina parts, and they consisted of Leatherettes and rangefinders for 3 Big C cameras, but they'd been stored somewhere strange. The rangefinders were all corroded and the Leatherettes were all shrunken. I've only been able to use the Leatherettes or taking scraps from, or punching out new discs to go on film advance levers. Our other Leatherette's probably shrunken back a bit in width anyway, so this will probably fit quite well. Just want to get around the button there, the release button, neatly. Okay, and where's our other Leatherette? Here it is. Now all it remains is to make a cut. Right, I can see where that cut is. I'll peel that off, cut that all the way through, put it back. See how we got on. Yes, I think I'll be able to push those two together. Cut for the other side. Needs to go there. Alright, let's glue everything down and see how it goes. Let's take that off again. Apply some adhesive to this leatherette. I noted in at the beginning when I was checking the cameras out that the leatherettes on this camera were unusually lumpy, and it had obviously had multiple layers of adhesive. And that turned out to be the case, and the adhesive was very, very thick and lumpy. Some of it came off with solvent, some of it had to be scraped off, none of it went smoothly. And here I'm just applying this direct to the leatherette and then spreading it out with a toothpick, trying to get an even cover, particularly to the edges. Leatherettes peel from the edges, they don't peel from the centre. Okay, it's a bit messy. Let's see if we can get this in place. Okay, so I'm just rubbing that off with my finger just to remove the uncured adhesive, and just stretch out the leatherette a bit so it meets the edges as much as possible. Get these edges buttered up neatly. I think that looks pretty good. Put the film advance lever in place. If you're repairing a lot of cameras, you'll end up with odd pieces of leatherette that you had to replace for one reason or another, typically because they were too broken to continue with. I always save those pieces. You can use them as scraps to repair another leatherette where you just need to cut in a patch. Just put a touch of grease around that button there so it's not sticking to the leatherette. The leatherette, as I say, is shrunken. It's probably quite tight around that button. That's working nicely. Okay, that looks okay. I think once that's been given a little wipe and a bit of a polish, that'll disappear entirely. I'll put the back catch cover and tripod surround on there next. Okay, leatherettes for camera number 3. Leatherettes for camera number 2 went without any unusual events, so I didn't bother showing you the rest of that. Let's get this lot on. So first of all, I've got 2 tiny patches that go on here, here and here, and they just serve to stop you getting a dimple in the leatherette at that point. So I'll apply a bit of adhesive to this piece of paper. Dip the disc in it, pop it into place. That's one. Sometimes these things lift off with the leatherette, and sometimes they're missing because people have serviced the camera before, they've fallen off and they didn't know what they were and they've just thrown them away. Okay, so that's all good. Now I can put the leatherette on the base plate here. I've given that one last wipe with naphtha, so that's quite clear. Here's my leatherette. This has all been cleaned. Scraped off any old adhesive and so forth from it. And here I'm applying the adhesive direct to the leatherette. You want to get good cover, even cover, get it right to the edges. because the leatherettes are going to peel. They peel from the edges, they don't peel from the centre. I once had a camera here for servicing, and whoever had serviced it the previous occasion had only put adhesive on the edges. There was none in the middle of the leatherette, which is certainly an unusual practice. Alright, so I've got a nice even covering there. Bring this back in. I bet you didn't see much of that because the camera was probably out of focus. So that's life as we know it. Now leatherettes commonly shrink, particularly if they've been off the camera for some time. You may find it doesn't want to seep around raised areas like here or this boss in the middle. They may need extra careful to get that seated correctly. That's looking pretty good. This contact adhesive, while it's still wet, will rub away quite easily with your finger. You can also rub it away with a toothpick. If your adhesive is too aggressive with its solvents, it may actually melt the leatherette covering, so be careful. Avoid having any adhesive on the surface of the front surface of the leatherette if at all possible. This stuff that I'm using is generally quite good. Some leatherettes don't like it, but fortunately that's not many of them. Okay, so that part went fine, and I need to put the patch on here and put a back catch cover and tripod surround in place. Here's our patch for the advance lever. For small pieces it's best to put some adhesive on a piece of paper and transfer it on with a toothpick. Not do it like I'm doing it here, that's just being clumsy. And I put too much on for good measure. Again, make sure you get good coverage right to the edges. You don't want puddles of adhesive there. It should just be wet with adhesive and no more. Alright, let's get that in place. The leatherette does have a grain, so you can amuse yourself by getting the grain aligned with the grain on the camera. That'll be fine. Now this back catch and tripod surround here. So get these pieces where I can find them. I assembled these two pieces together. Put a screw up through here. It's going up through the longer of the slots. And our spring goes between the screw and here, and on a good day it doesn't ping away into the distance. Okay, that's sitting there. It's like a ticking time bomb. I'll just get that into place on the base of the camera. Now if you had any thought at all that that spring had been displaced while you were lifting it into place, don't screw this down tight because you'll just distort the spring. That looks like it went well. And there are 2 screws that hold this down in place. I'll tighten those now and check again. That's all good, that's all moving nice and smoothly. The base plate leatherette looks very tidy. Good job. So, leatherette on the front of the camera next.